Wayne Woodson, educator, consultant, writer, speaker, minister, and entrepreneur. A journey that started in Detroit has landed me here in the city of Atlanta. Dr. Carter G. Woodson once said, "If a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated." I have dedicated my professional career to promoting the work of Black Americans, to ensuring affordable and equitable educational opportunities, and fighting so that all Americans in this country have equal rights under the law. Although the journey has not been easy, I am proud to do the work that I do. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Happy November. We're still in election week. I hope that everyone is having a great weekend so far. I am very, very, very excited about today's guest, Dr. Lori Hicks from Kentucky State University. We have known each other, at least 20 years. We went to high school together, and she has done amazing work, not just as a professional performer, but in higher ed with young people, with preparing them. And many of her students are doing amazing things across the country. Before we get started, we do want to just remind everybody that if you would like to be a sponsor of the show, you can visit my website at rwaynewoodson.com, and all that information is on there. So I am excited to get today's show started. Let's bring on Dr. Hicks.
Hello, darling.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am good. No complaints.
Good. I was trying to figure out how to do this watch party, but I'm a little behind on these things. I'm learning.
Are you on your Facebook?
Yes.
It should just let you click watch party.
You would think. It probably does. It probably does. Well, we're gonna pray over that. Okay.
Well, we're glad to have you on the show.
And then I got my little grease blotcher here. Amen. All right. Let's go.
How are you doing? How are things going? How's life treating you?
Whoo. Well, I think we're all feeling, the craziness, but it has really been a roller coaster. I'm not gonna lie. I think you told me to be transparent. It's been a lot going on, blessings and tribulations and all at the same time. But I'm grateful that I'm learning. I'm grateful that I'm growing. I can feel myself growing and stretching. I'm doing things I've never done before, especially with social media. And I'm still, I'm looking forward to this next chapter in my life. I just turned 41. So I'm like, hey, welcome to the 40 and Up Club. That was last year, of course. But just seeing things through a totally different lens. And you've known me for a very long time. So that is, it is saying a lot. But just looking forward to, this next chapter and where God has taken me.
So let's start at the beginning, very beginning.
Okay.
So how did you get into music? Discuss some of your educational background. You can go back as far as you want to.
How long are we here? How did I get into music? My mother had my sister and I in piano lessons from 5 years old. My sister was much better at piano than I was. I was very stubborn, but she had us in piano lessons every week. And of course, in my church, Oak Grove AME Church in Detroit, Michigan, where I had my first solo. And I wanted to be in the young adult choir. I didn't want to be in the kiddie choir. I wanted to be with the bigger kids. So eventually I nagged, and they let me join the bigger kid crew. And by that time, everybody wanted to join the young adult choir. But I would play piano for the choir sometimes. And I was very big on listening to the radio and then playing, figuring out the melodies and figuring out the accompaniment and stuff for the songs that I enjoyed on the radio. And then getting up into high school, I went to Renaissance High School, of course, in Detroit, and I joined the varsity chorus my freshman year, along with Angela Burchett and Lori Hollins. I have to shout them out because we came up together. We started together, and we were also in a girl group that Renaissance had called Accord. Excuse me. And we sang all the time together between the choir. I was singing all the time at church, playing piano, and then with our female group, it took over. But let's go forward. Even though it was very natural for me, I still rebelled against it because I had this mindset that if you go into music, you won't be able to find a job. And Nina Scott, Nina Scott, I ain't gonna say it still ain't easy, but Nina Scott, my director in high school, sat me down. She sat me down several times, but this one in particular, she said, when she found out, she said, well, what are you going to major in? I said, accounting. And she said, what? Why? I was like, well, I want to be able to get a job. And she said, I can't get you out of the choir room. You're always on the piano. You're always writing music. Why wouldn't you go into music? I said, I want to be able to have a job. And she said, or I want to be able to make money is what I said. And she said, well, I make such and such a year. Is that okay? And it was like 70,000 back then. Oh, I hope I'm not telling her business. Sorry, mama. Sorry, Nina. But for me at that time, I was like, oh, all right, that's cool. That's cool. I could work with that. So then decided to major in music. And and I do want to add this really quickly, because I'm going to circle back to this in my research, but I did not want to join varsity chorus initially. And that was because they didn't sing gospel. They sang all this boring classical music. I had to study classical when I was doing piano, and I couldn't stand it. It was boring to me, and I was like, no, I don't want to be in that choir. They singing in other languages and stuff, and that doesn't interest me. So I was going to be in ROTC instead. So Nina Scott called my mama, and she said, she needs to be in choir. I need you to make sure that happens. And my mother said, no problem. And I was immediately enrolled in choir and I could not get out. And I look back on that like, what was I smoking on? It's like, that was just so stupid. How much different would my life have been if they had allowed me? I mean, if they gave me what I wanted, which was something random. So I am thankful for those angels and for that direction. So fast forward, went ahead, majored in music. At first I was supposed to go to Tennessee State, but Dr. Carl Smith from Kentucky State University got a wind of me and started to recruit me. And then next thing I know, I'm at Kentucky State with Angela, with Lori, and with a whole bunch of other folk from Detroit. So yeah, it really, I had the guidance, I had direction. It came to me naturally, but I had, coming from Detroit, where music is everywhere, I had a chance to cultivate that, my church music, as well as classical music, as well as the R&B and things that I enjoyed doing, the who can I run to, all that. So we did that as well in the girls group. So we were at Kentucky State together. I was writing music there as well, doing well in my classes. We were given opportunities to tour as well, so we continued to tour. And I was just being stretched. I started off voice and piano major. And after a couple of years, it just got to be too much. So I dropped piano, but I was music education. And back then it was a 5-year degree. So after 5 years, I graduated, and the next influence was Mr. Andrew Smith at Kentucky State. And while, the choir, we were very, very active, but what really developed me as an individual was Mr. Smith's tutelage, his guidance, um, him getting in my grill about certain things. Cause I'm like, I still didn't really want to sing classical. I'm like, why do I have to sing all this? I'm not going into the studio with that, or I'm not going to be able, whatever. And I just did not understand the importance. I didn't understand the connection, all of that. So I'll circle back to that. But Mr. Andrew Smith was like, girl, you need to be out there singing. You need to get your technique together, and you need to go to grad school. And I wanted to go for composition, but I did not have a degree in composition. So I was denied entry at the University of Michigan for composition. I was mad. And I'm like, I'm not going to grad school. I don't care. I wanted to go to Michigan and I didn't get in, so I'm not going. And he called my mother as well. My mother was he called my mother, Xavier Lee, may she rest. He called my mother as well and said, we are in the car. I'm getting ready to take her to this grad school audition. And she said she doesn't want to go. And the audition was at Bowling Green State. And so, they got in my grill and I went reluctantly, but I did well. And then they offered me a full ride. But I still wanted to do composition. So guess what I did? I turned it down. I turned it down. And then they had Miss Myra Merritt, who's the voice teacher there, call me and basically talked me into it. So, and she did. And I'm grateful that she did again. And I went for voice and composition at first. And then I ended up dropping composition because I was like, this is not the kind of composition that I want to do, where there's no melody. I'm no offense to the new music folk out there, but no time signature, no key signature, just close your eyes and write. And that just really, I enjoyed the arranging spirituals. I enjoyed arranging for choirs. So I said, I'm just going to stick to what I enjoy as far as that concerned. But I started to get to grow tremendously vocally and learning opera. I started to enjoy it. I said, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it now. The characters and the language, all this is starting to make sense. My lack of being able to blend in choir was finally at my advantage. So all the years of sticking out in the soprano section, now I get to just let my chords hang out. But I just really started to grow, and then I went hard in opera and finished at Bowling Green and went straight into my doctorate at University of Michigan. And like I was telling you earlier, I'd finished when I was 27. And I didn't go the route where, people go out and perform first and they make a name for themselves and then they come back and teach. I did know that getting the doctorate, I wanted to be able to teach on the collegiate level. And I also knew that I wanted to teach at an HBCU. And it was kind of like this calling very early on when I started to really realize, okay, I'm going to stay in music. All right, I'm going to sing. I'm also going to teach. Then where am I going to do that? And where can I be the most effective? And going through Michigan, there were quite a few African-American students. And, we had a really good support system there. But when you talk about, well, are you going to teach? You're going to teach at a HBCU? And the response would be like, no, no. And I said, well, I am. I'm going back to an HBCU to teach. I was very passionate about that early on, but I had no idea of the challenges or of the immense rewards, because the rewards you get, I feel, pay off much more, and they hit you at a much deeper place when you see the light bulb go off in a student's had that maybe never would have been exposed to the kind of experience that you've had. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, so finished at Michigan, 2007 when I was 27, and then I had to find a job. And these teaching positions don't come open very often. They are few and far between to find a tenure track teaching position. Hi, good morning. Um, so I ended up working at a temp agency and moving back home. Hey, Brandon, moving back home well, at that point my parents were in Ohio, so I moved to Ohio. And oh, thank you, Herbert. um and then I was like, okay, where am I going to find work? So I started, hey Omar. This is funny. This is my first time doing something like this. Anyway, so I'm like, oh, I got to stop and talk to everybody. Anyway, working at a temp agency, then I started applying for adjunct positions, and there were none that were posted. So I just sent my resume to all the schools in the area. It was like, look, if you're looking for somebody, I'm ready. I'm whatever. So I got a temporary position at Ohio University for like a semester. And then I got hired on at the University of Dayton, as well as Central State at the same time. So I was able to, go back and forth. And after that is when I got a call from Dr. Isaiah McGee at Claflin University. And I accepted that position and was there for 9 years. And that really shaped me as a pedagogue, as an inspiration to those students, as a vocalist. It really shaped a lot of what I am doing now. And I am so honored and grateful for that experience. The students, my kids that came through there, I was able to do so much. They soaked up everything that I had to offer, it was so rewarding. Kids who, had never even been to an opera, I was ever able to take them to their first one. I had students who, couldn't read music when they first came in, and now are getting their masters and doctorates in music and singing overseas and doing all these wonderful things, teaching as well. So I'm very proud of the legacy that I was able to build there, and the support that my colleagues at Claflin University were always very supportive. I was able to direct shows. We had no money, and my chair would be like, "All right, I could scrape this up for you." And hi, that's one of my babies. Hi, Darshaya. I was able to direct operas there, and with no money, I had to get very creative, very, very creative. I think the first thing I did, my daddy came down and built the set. May he rest as well. My dad came and he built the set. I'm making costumes. We did, excerpts of Porgy and Bess. And then I also got creative in arranging the accompaniment. We did them all in the Night Visitors. And instead of orchestra, I arranged it for the wind ensemble. So the students were able to play with that production. I also got creative and did a magic flute and set it in Harlem. So I rewrote the libretto to be English and made it more modern. The kids were really able to attach to the storyline. They had fun singing that kind of story, and they related to it more. And, just they were able to sing I had a Queen of the Night even back then, and I had a Zarastro. I had all the voices. And I'm like, I'm just giving them something that, that they can excel in. They can also take into graduate school if they so desire.
So what would you say to members of, the Black society that say that opera and classical music is not for them? Because you and I both had the same initial thing. One, I did not plan to join the varsity chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Pruitt, my counselor, threw me in that class because I needed a class that period. Mm-hmm. And like the whole first 2 months, I just sat over in the corner just completely uninterested because I
Isn't
was
that
like, I don't
crazy?
like this kind of music.
Isn't that crazy?
And I swore that, I would never go into education.
Yeah, I think I said that at one point too.
I was going to be a lawyer.
I'm
So,
gonna be a famous opera singer.
I was going to be a lawyer, and I was never going to do it. So we both had, similar initial onsets. Miss God has an amazing way of just making things tangible, and then after a while, you don't realize you're doing it.
Yeah.
But what would you say to people who would say that this music is not for us or this music is not part of our culture?
It's not. It wasn't written for us. No, it's not embedded in our culture, but it's just music. It's still beautiful music. It's stories that if you know the story, you got the high price hooker and Traviata. You got come on now. Of course now I can't think of anything more, but these are stories that are still relevant. The relationships and the interactions and all of that are things that we can actually relate to now. um so it when I opened up to opera and when I opened my students up to opera, it increased their palette, it increased their culture. And I say, if you want to increase things, if you want to be able to maneuver in different spaces and be marketable, this is an aspect of that, being able to being able again to maneuver to navigate outside of your little bubble. And coming from Kentucky State into Bowling Green, I was still in a bubble to where I was surrounded by Black people all the time, which is great, but that's not the real world.
Right.
And the real world is very, very diverse, and there's also a majority that you have to learn how to maneuver in. And when I really, started to poke at my bubble and open myself up to all the different people I was coming in contact with, all the different styles of music that I was being exposed to, I felt like, the sky was the limit, really. And there was no kind of music that I couldn't do.
So, and that leads me right into my next question. You have done a great job of just infusing jazz, gospel, classical, pop, hip, everything
Yeah.
into your work. Why do you think that that's important? I mean, why have you been so dedicated to the infusing of all of that in not just what you do, but in your students as well?
It really wasn't intentional. It just really is a reflection of who I am, and as a musician, as a person, growing up in church, coming up listening to I don't want to say it, but to Live Crew and and Jodeci, and I loved R&B. I listened to the radio all the time. I got into Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong and those when I was in college. So I really got into jazz at that point. It was just an evolution of all the different things that I enjoyed, and I pulled from those elements into my musical palette. So yes, classical and opera was what I was studying, and yes, that is, what the training required. But I always kind of bucked against it has to be this one thing. And I did not feel like I was represented fully by only doing this one thing. So it did get to a point where, yeah, I struggled. I was conflicted. I'm like, I'm not fulfilled because if I have to only do this one thing, it doesn't reflect me as a whole. So I really started to be intentional at that point. That was probably when I was teaching at in between UD and Claflin. But my students were struggling as well. They didn't like the music, they didn't understand it. And I wanted them to be able to enjoy what I was trying to teach them and where I was trying to take them. So, I'd jazz up, or I'd change up the warm ups. I'd say, well, what'd you sing on Sunday? And if whatever song that was, we take a little piece of that, and that would be their warm up. And so that they really started to enjoy it, but then could be more self aware of, okay, I'm learning this technique, but I can also apply it here. And I'm going to use LaQuinton as an example. And he, even though he did not finish in music, but he stayed with me in lessons and went on to seminaries, getting ready to start his doctorate as well. And the technique that he uses when he is wailing and when he is leading all these choirs or these churches, he will tell me all the time, like, I would not be able to do this if I did not have that technique that you taught me. If I wasn't able to implement that. But it goes a step beyond, this is the way you're supposed to sing, or this is the healthy technique. But how do you take that and apply it to the style that you desire, that you want to go in? Because quite frankly, and this is a part of my research with one of my lectures that I give, from the Black church to the opera stage, and on all honesty, the industry is not classical. The jobs out there in music are not classical. There's 1% of performance jobs that you can do that are all classical and require classical technique. Everything else, about 50%, is in the church. So you've got, if you look at the market, if you look at the trends, if you look at what's going on in the music community, we're training students. Hi, Patrick. We're training singers to only go into 1% of the field. And to me, that did not make sense. But I knew, we have standards of accreditation. And yes, thank you. We had standards of accreditation that we had to meet. We had the traditions of, vocal or music education and vocal training that we had to work through. Even in Claflin's, I believe for the choir, you were forbidden from singing in gospel choir. Like, you could not. And I think a lot of HBCUs had that tradition where if you're in concert choir, you cannot be in gospel ensemble. Yes, good. Good, Herbert. Yeah, and we have to keep talking about this and coming up with other ways to infuse the technique with the industry. So that has been what I've been working hard to work through. So like I said, I do this lecture called From the Black Church to the Opera Stage. My students had a lot of trouble, sorry y'all, a lot of trouble embracing the technique, embracing classical music. So I really looked at ways to bridge those gaps, to make them feel like they were seen, they were a part of this genre. So instead of I won't say instead of, in addition to the Italian hits, I also made sure they had spirituals every single semester. And, if you've heard it this way in church, this is, how it was intended, showing, teaching them style, exposing them to Black art songs that had poetry and subject matter that reflected the Black experience. A Black opera. I got a grant to research Black opera composers. I didn't get the big grant, unfortunately, but I love that there are so many artists now, Black composers and classical music are really starting to be recognized now. So that research will get done. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, there were, I had pages and pages of composers who had written operas that were out of print. You couldn't find it. All of this material that really does reflect who we are, where we come from, the good and the bad. It wasn't all slavery. It wasn't all this and that. You had operas that were set in Africa, and then operas that were set, in the juke joint or in the bayou.
I think you brought up something that was very important too, in that there is an expectation when you see an African-American performer that they're doing other things. Even in terms, I was not an opera person. I could sing opera, but I did recitals, oratorio work, and those types of things. And when people come to my recitals, they expected everything. They expect me to sing jazz. They expected a gospel piece. They even expected, that just means you're popular, Dr. Hicks. They even expected, me to include art songs and things by African-American composers, which a lot of people do not even realize exist. And it's so sad that this day and time, we're still letting people know that, we did write other things. Mm-hmm. So how do you get your students to make that transition? Most of our students come to college with a gospel background. I mean, I did, you did. I mean, that's just what we do. We
Mm-hmm.
learn our culture primarily if we're Christians in church.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help your students make that transition?
I would ask them, okay, what kind of music do you like? What's some of your favorite songs? If they were upbeat and, catchy, I would choose a song, a classical song that had kind of that same element, those same elements. And if it was something that was, lamenting, or something that was not depressing, but had more heavy and minor key or whatever, then I would choose a classical piece that reflected that. I would ask them what subjects they like to talk about. So I choose music not from, "Ooh, you sound good singing this," but what kind of music do you enjoy listening to and singing in your other styles? And then how can we connect that to a classical piece that you can learn and then perform? And I had to get really, and I learned to do this over the years, but I learned to enforce: what are your translations? What are you talking about? Yes. What are you talking about and why? Because quite frankly, if you're not bringing your interpretation to the message, I can just go listen to a recording. What is going to set you apart? And how are you going to communicate this so that it is universal? So no matter what language you're singing, we can understand you. Because even if you're singing Amazing Grace, nobody wants it bland. No, but we want to know how you feel about that Amazing Grace. So we also would look at whatever they were doing in churches, we would practice in my studio. If you're the minister of music at your church, or you're leading the praise team or whatever, I want to hear how you're approaching it. And I want to bridge that to the techniques that you are learning, so you don't go and do one thing in church and then come back in here and do another. And I talk about that in that lecture. It's like, I felt like I was forgive me, but a crackhead just sneaking over here singing gospel or singing R&B. And then I acted like, in my lessons, oh no, this is all I do. It's like, that is not that was not a accurate reflection of me, of what spoke to my spirit, of what music I enjoyed creating and communicating. So really figuring out what made them tick, what they liked, and pulling from the classical repertoire that could accentuate that.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm glad that it popped up
Yeah.
and that you were able to see it. And thank you to everyone for your comments. There is one that I want to go back and just address. COVID has impacted everything. With you being a voice teacher, with and dealing with students on a musical standpoint, is one is one thing to teach a math lecture remotely. How are you accomplishing what you expect as an educator with COVID?
Well, let me clarify, because I'm an administrator, because I'm the department chair, I'm not teaching lessons. This year at least. And and so that aspect of it, I did not have to figure out, as far as the studio and maintaining that. But I was already teaching online, giving some coachings and things like that online. If I had to be away at a performance while I was at Claflin and I was going to miss a lesson, there were several times I'd be like, okay, let's just jump on and coach through this. It still was a lot of things that I am learning to be more effective, but exploring all of the different programs. There's a program that we order called Collabora. People are coming out with things now that will cater to the needs of musicians, virtual musicians. So I was blessed that I was already, trying to figure out how to do that online. Because I also, it's difficult when you're trying to have a private studio and you're working full time, and I have a 5-year-old, but when you're raising a child and all of this is going on, to stop and say, okay, now it's time for your lesson. Come on over. You know, my son is running around and all this, everything is going on. So it was better for me in my situation to start teaching online before COVID. And post COVID, actually going into COVID, I don't want to digress, but I was in the hospital. And that really woke me up from, okay, I need to do something different. I'm not really operating in the fullness of the things that I enjoy. Administration is one thing. I was learning administration, and I will say it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But I was not doing music. I wasn't doing my music.
Mm-hmm.
And chair of music, I didn't get to do music. I just felt like I wasn't being fed, you know, the way I was used to when you're working with students in music and you're constantly doing music. I was constantly getting that creativity, that joy, and I had to start seeking it out post when I went into the hospital or as an administrator. So came out of the hospital, was like, all right, what do I need to be doing? What can I do to start pouring back into my cup the things that I love, which is teaching voice and performing and music and writing. And so that at that point is when I really started to develop my online program, which is the voice training program, the 5S voice method. So that I've been doing these workshops, and I actually got a grant to do it some years ago while I was at Claflin, which started off just for gospel singers, vocal technique for gospel singers. And then I called it Highest Praise Voice Care. So I really was targeting a certain audience, as well as teaching at the Hampton Ministers Conference. That's really what started me in thinking about how to translate this technique into something that would benefit church musicians and gospel artists. So after the pandemic hit, I was like, okay, how can I develop this? So I started in business coaching. I started, developing the package of that, and actually just launched that last week. So it's completely online. And it speaks to a universal audience of, if you are using your voice professionally, these are techniques that can help you keep that voice healthy, keep it conditioned, and address the issues that you come to with hoarseness, nodules, nodes, all these things. And I really was passionate about targeting gospel artists because, again, coming up in church, but I love the ministry. I love gospel. Oh, thank you, Herbert. I love gospel singing. I still love to holler here and there. And I want them to be able to do it without wear and tear on the voice. I want them to be able to minister.
So you don't want them to say, "Ooh, I sang so well, my voice went out."
That does not make sense to me.
That was the thing in the 80s and 90s. Everybody wanted their voice to go out when they finished singing. I'm like,
how does that make God gave you this gift? He gave you this pretty 2 little ligaments. He gave you this gift, and you banging it up against the wall. How does that make sense? If my son did that with a $200 toy, I would be so upset.
Right, yeah, it's like driving your car into a wall every morning when you wake up.
Yeah, but it's still driving. Oh, is it still running? Oh, it's still running.
And I love my gospel, but I think you bring up a very valid point. When I was studying with Uzi Brown, who I studied with after I finished Morehouse, he was like, technique is technique.
Yes.
I'm going to teach you the technique. You can use it however you want. So he's had students on Broadway. He's had students that have done classical music. He has students that are church musicians or gospel singers, because he always taught that the technique is the technique. I'm not telling you what to do with it.
Yes.
But we have to have healthy singing.
Yes.
And I think sometimes that is eliminated. Right. Or you'll be 40 and they will sing anymore.
Right. And if you're basing your livelihood off of this, then I'm sorry, a basketball player is going to do everything, or the surgeon or whatever you're doing is going to do everything they can to protect the instruments that provide their livelihood. And this is that. So, being very intentional and wanted to create that space, not judging. Hopefully,
Right.
hopefully they didn't feel judged, but creating that space of, yeah, this is what this technique is about, but this is how you can use it. This is how it can preserve. Because I don't want you to get up one Sunday morning and be like, I did too much last week, or I did too much in rehearsal, and now I can't minister. And
And
to
the
me,
other thing is,
yeah,
unlike when we sing opera recitals, we are not singing straight for 2, 3, 4 hours. And sometimes these church services are like 2, 3, 4 hours, and the
that's the morning
musicians are
service.
consistently singing. And then
Then
they
you
might
have the
have like
afternoon.
2 or 3 services.
Yeah,
That in itself is just taxing on the instrument. So, using some technique or even learning how to use it well will help you be able to do what you do better. That's anything. Even that is like the only type of music, and my thing is research, where you consistently sing for like the whole time. The only time
Yeah,
you're
it's
probably not
hard.
singing is during the sermon. Even in
Yeah.
operas, the leads are not on stage singing for 2.5 hours.
Nope. Nope.
And
It's
so I think
it's
you made a
very
valid point
taxing.
that the
Yeah.
technique can even help them do what they do better. And if they really look, most of the top gospel singers have coaches.
Yes. But we also keep in mind what we're listening to on their recordings is not where they sang it from beginning to end. These are different takes, and they put the takes together.
Right.
I have rarely seen an artist get up at their live performance and sing that song from beginning to end the way it was on the recording. But us in our churches, we try to emulate that. And we're not taking those things into consideration, that this is a consolidation of all these different takes, and they take the best ones and then they put them together. So if you're going to have to figure out what works for your voice, what you can do on that song from beginning to end. And another thing, Patrick, thank you. And another thing is having teachers and coaches that it's difficult to have one. I shouldn't say it's difficult. I think it is rare to find someone who has the classical training and is teaching the classical technique, but also teaching it in a way that you can translate to other things.
That's tangible to what you do.
Yes. Yes. So it is one thing to say, yeah, you can use this technique in anything. It's another thing to provide the space for them to use it, and for them to actually apply it to where, okay, well, how can I still get that squall, or how can I still get that, that wail and not strain myself? All right, let's take the wail into the mask. Let's adjust the air pressure. So really digging into how it translates to other things. So we do have to take a step further, because we're not dealing with singers that come from that technique. So a step further in, yes, this is a technique, but I'm not trying to take you away from the style. I don't want to hear my gospel sung like an opera. I don't. I don't want to hear R&B sung like an opera. I want you to be able to adhere to the style, but you also have to understand what all that style entails, and then how you can infuse these healthy techniques in that without losing your style.
And that the voice is an instrument. And I tell people all the time, one of the challenges when I sang all the time, full time, which I realized early on was not my calling, is that unlike a violinist or any other instrument where they can just take it and put it in a case, you are your instrument.
Yep.
And everything impacts it. I didn't have food restrictions. Like I know a lot of singers have all these things that can't. I never had those issues. What I had was climate issues.
Mm-hmm.
So the slightest adjustment in the temperature or the humidity, I would be haywire. And I realized the importance of that when I went to Denver to perform for their NAMM chapter event. They told me to come a week early because I needed to adjust to the altitude. And I was like, I don't ever have a problem with altitude. I sing all the time. I'm good. So, I came like the day before, 10 minutes before I got on stage. I didn't know how to get my instrument to make it. And, I was singing all this heavy rep. Like I was singing, the Carmen aria, and I was doing Avant Ducky. And I was like, I can't sustain this program. And literally after every song, I had to walk off stage.
Yeah.
Literally.
You can say, where did my breath go? Colorado is a beast to sing in.
And you don't take into account those things, even with gospel singers. You're using a mic, so you often don't have to sing as loud. But even that technique, I don't know how to use mics. Like, I just don't.
I'm
And so when I'm at
learning.
church and they ask me to use a mic,
I'm
they have
learning.
to turn stuff down and things. So I mean,
Yes.
you're
Or we
very
be way
valid
back
point.
here from the microphone. Like, no. Yeah, I'm learning. I was in the studio a couple weeks ago and it was like, oh, that's way too heavy. You need to, yeah. And then I have to keep listening back. So there's a definite adjustment and being mindful, being self-aware of those different, I have reflux. So, being mindful of when I eat, what I'm eating. It took a long time to establish that discipline, and I still am. But it's just that's why we have cans of air. Oh, do they? I'm sorry.
Hey, Brian.
That is busted. Okay. um. So yeah, we have to be mindful of all of that. But if you're, it seems like going through the classical training made us aware of that. Or if you're at this certain level of professional of this professional status, then maybe you're aware of it. But our everyday singers, people who minister to us week after week, they need this information too. No, you may not be making millions or thousands, all this money, or your whole livelihood might not be based off of singing, but you are still, whether it's your ministry, whether it's, your side hustle, or whether you're working toward, you're an emerging artist, you have to start putting all those principles and things in place now, so that when you do blow up, or when you do get to where you want to be, or you are in more demand, you're not having to learn it then and going out on stage. You don't know whether or not you have anything, or you're going to get shots in your throat of steroids.
I had to do
And
that once too. And then they put
don't
me
come
on
at me with
vocal
no
rest
needle.
for like 2 weeks
Yep.
afterwards. They were like, because
Yep.
you are not, as Leontine Price says, you are not singing on your interest. You are singing on your principle, and you got to get through it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't understand, when people have paid. I always tell my students, the audience does not care what you're going through. They have paid for these tickets. They don't. I had a performance like
But
right
you
after
have
my
to.
father passed. I couldn't just be like, oh, I'm not coming. You know, Denise Graves had a major medical condition in the middle of an opera, and she
I know.
sang.
I know. But I think, and it is difficult because no, I have not made my career singing full time, but I did hemorrhage, and I was pushing myself too far. Yeah, exactly. I was pushing myself too far and didn't know how to say no, didn't know when to shut up, and had to go through those weeks of rehabilitation as well. Um, and so I can only imagine the pressure of a choice when you are on Broadway, or you've got this show coming up. And I remember watching Mary Mary's show, and she was like, had just gone to the doctor, and she said, well, I got to give the people what they want. I'm like, no.
Well,
No, because you
like
might not recover.
my brother and his wife are on Broadway, and just I did not realize till I went to visit to see him when he was in Book of Mormon, the taxing work that they're doing. Like 6 days a week and sometimes 8 shows, and his role did not have an understudy, so he could not be like, oh, I don't feel well today. Can the understudy go on? Like, he had to do every show. And when I went to visit, I was like, and I saw the show, I was like, this is not normal. And so I think technique, as you're saying, is critical for everyone that's using the instrument, which jumps me to my next point. You launched this month your boot camp.
Yes.
What is this? Like, what do people expect? I know I saw the promo and you said that it is, self-paced. So explain some of this to our audience.
Yeah, it's a 5-day program. It's basically the intro to basic technique. My 5S method is support, strength, space, smile, and submit. And it breaks down the techniques in each one of these categories. So the videos, they are self-paced, so you can go through it at your leisure. I explain the body, how the body works together. I explain, you see images of a vocal cords, you see images of my own vocal injury. And I start off talking about the mental and your physical preparation for the voice, because of course our bodies are our instruments, but we don't spend enough time talking about what's going on in here, because the mind is the strongest muscle. So I'm getting off track. Anyway, so I talk about your support. I've got exercises that you and practice tracks that people can work off of, and it's for speakers and singers. So I've got exercises that are not sung or not for singers, and I have some that are for singers. And I'll be developing more advanced levels of those exercises, but I started off with a very basic level. So you don't have to read music, you don't have to match pitch, you don't have to have all of these things already. And because I'm not teaching you how to sing. I'm not teaching people how to sing. Let me say that. I'm teaching you how to support the voice, and I'm taking these classical techniques, and this is how they help maintain a healthy voice. This is how they help stretch your voice and project your voice in a way that you're not worried about your voice. So you
and
can
I
do
think
it.
you just brought up something that's great, that it can be used for speakers too. And a lot of people don't realize, people do a lot of public speaking, teachers, professors,
Preaches.
newscasters. That is taxing on the instrument as well.
Yes. Podcast. Yeah. Yeah. The more speaking I was doing at conferences and presenting, and as I started doing these workshops, that's where it came from as well. I'm like, oh, okay, I can't just be out here talking without thinking about how I'm using my voice, because I was getting very tired. And I'm like, I can sing, all these operas, but I'm struggling delivering and also lecturing. So I really had to start thinking like a singer when I was speaking.
And where can they find your boot camp? How can they access it? Where's that information?
You can go to lchstudios.com and look for my page for courses. You can visit my Instagram at Dr. Hicks Music. The link is in the bio. It's on the Teachable platform. So if you're already on Teachable, you can look up 5S Bootcamp. And Facebook, I've got it on there as well.
I'm writing this stuff down, so when I do my follow-up, I can put this stuff in there. So now, I don't sing at church. That's not what I do in the Lord's church. But I have been getting up on Sundays to watch your Sunday morning warm-ups.
They're fun, ain't they?
So tell us how you came up with that idea, and who you're targeting that for, where you came up with those exercises, that software that you use with the shouting music on it.
Yes. So it started off as I think all of us coming up in classical would kind of take the classical vocalises and things like that and gospel them up. So we'd be singing arias like the gospel songs and stuff like that. So from back in the day, we were doing that. Like I said earlier, I would take when I was warming my students up, I'd do different patterns and things like that. So it would remind them of things of the other styles of music. So just targeting the gospel community, being able to give a service or serve them in a way that nobody else really has before. You've got warm-ups, but nothing that really emulated the gospel style and things that they would be doing week after week. Thank you, Patrick. So I was playing around with Hoop Triggers. And Hoop Triggers is the app. I don't have my phone, my other phone. I got two phones, but Hoop Triggers I was introduced to at the Hampton conference, and I downloaded it. Then I've had it for years, but I was just kind of playing around with it, and I was playing the praise thing, and then I was just like, ooh, it's just like, oh, let's find another one. And then when I did the ABCs, of course I had listened to Patti LaBelle and on Sesame Street, and I'm like, why can't we do more of that? So then I just did it. And like I said, I'm trying to get used to, make it accessible. Exactly. I'm trying to get used to using social media more. So I said, well, after I took the job at First Christian here in Frankfort, Kentucky, I said, nah, I got to start getting up and warming up in the morning. So I just decided to let's fuse the two together. Y'all get up and warm up with me. But what's funny is by the time y'all see that video, I've done it like 4 times trying to get the sound right. Or my son has run in and something. So I'm good and warm by the time you get the video y'all get. But
Well,
just
I enjoyed last week because your son was in there warming up with you.
I just decided to just stop telling him, just come on.
But I think that on a separate note, that exposes him to stuff too. So when he gets older and hears these things, and people like, that's not for us, he's like, well, my mother's been singing like that since I was 2.
Yeah. And my child, he would tell me if I didn't hit a note right. And he'd be like, ah! Like, okay, mama will do it again. Okay, let me do it again. And then I said, was that okay? He was like, yeah. Yeah.
So that brings me to something that, is challenging for a lot of people. How do you manage all this and be an active mother?
Okay. I told you I was in the hospital, right? Huh? So I am having to learn boundaries. I actually am on leave right now from Kentucky State to be able to focus on my son's needs, and homeschooling, all of that, his autism therapies. So I did have to take a step back from work and the day-to-day to be able to focus on that. And I'm really glad that I did, because I was struggling trying to figure out how to do it all and still pursue my dreams. So learning boundaries, learning when to shut it off, and also when to incorporate him in what I'm doing, because he loves me. When I'm sitting at the piano playing, he's gonna pull out something and start drumming. Or if I'm working on a piece of music, he knows all the exercises. He knows he knows the theme song I'm getting ready to play for y'all. He knows. Yeah, he is around for all of it. But also I had to say, okay, well, no, it's Daniel time. So okay, let's draw a picture, let's paint, let's rock out, because he loves rock music. Yeah, he's stretching me. So just I had to start being very intentional, much more organized. As a singer, I just was not very organized before. I'm definitely learning. And focusing on what's most important. If I'm drained, if I'm exhausted, I can't pour into him. I can't pour into, my work. So I had to really start being intentional about my self-care, taking care of my body, working out, eating better, drinking my water. And all of that happened post-pandemic.
Those of us, especially when we get to administration, it's always that mindset, like, if I'm not here, it's going to all fall apart. And I think that
you got to say it again. It broke up.
Oh, I said, often when we get to administration and higher ed, it's that thought that if I'm not here, to all fall apart. We take on a whole lot of work. We do a whole lot of stuff. And especially, people understand when you work at smaller schools or HBCUs, you don't just do one job, and so that I'm glad you learned at this age that, you can't be all things to all people.
I had to. My heart could not take it, literally. That's why I was in the hospital. My heart could not take it. And also being behind the, not Iron Curtain, but behind the curtain in administration and at my alma mater, you see so many other things that it's like, it can break your heart, literally. And the changes and things that you want to be able to make. Yes, you got these great ideas, and I will work harder than anybody you put me up against. I will put in the hours. I was getting up at 2 a.m. working, there early, trying to, and trying to pick my son up as well. It just was, I was doing too much, and I had to learn that change is a process. And if you really want to leave a legacy, and if you really want to make, lasting changes, you got to back up. You got to slow down and you got to put a plan together. step-by-step plan, not just a goal and not just this is what I want to do. But okay, these are the steps that we're going to do. And also I had to learn better. I'm still learning to delegate better. And because I can't wear everybody's hat. And especially when you at a small school and you in music, they call you for every musical thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you still running, if the band is playing, you got to make sure they're good. If the choir is singing, you got to make sure they're good. Jazz, but all of these things, all of these different moving parts, which I had never, this is only my third year on the job. So I had never been over all these moving parts. I knew how to manage my voice students and do an opera production and then go off and perform. That's what and compose as well. But all of these other moving parts, and it gets very, very lonely. I'm used to being cool with everybody, and now I'm folks' boss. I'm younger than everybody.
Tell them no, they can't do stuff.
And I'm younger than them. I became chair at 30. I'm 41 now. So I was 30, 38, 39. So I'm younger than the people that I'm over now. They didn't care nothing about me being a graduate. They like, what are you bringing to the table? I'm a woman. And we don't, I didn't think that was an issue, but it took a man to point out, well, they doing that to you because you're a woman. I said, huh? It took a man to point that out to me. And I just couldn't figure out, like, anyway. So there are so many different things that can work against you. So I had to learn to take my time. I am learning to take my time, put a plan in place, but also know when to pivot, and know when, okay, that's not working, and bring your team. See, when you start your own business, you get to pick your own team. It sometimes in other corporate situations, you get to get rid of some folk but we got tenure. We got it takes a lot to change your team members, when, in a situation like this. So had to get the right team in place and be able to lean on them and know how to work with the team that I had as well, and how to be able to lean on the ones I know I could lean on. So yeah, I'm learning.
Well, as we're moving to our close, what are some final thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers?
Oh gosh. I'm glad Aisha brought up, change is a process. And know where you're going, even when you can't see how you're going to get there. I'm proud of the things I have been able to do. I've been able to implement new programs at Kentucky State, in industry and production, as well as jazz and world music. But it's still a process. Just because you started it doesn't mean everybody, they got this degree, now I'm coming there. Like, no, there's still other steps to the process that you have to plan for and have to put in place. So knowing that change is the process, take your time, take care of yourself and set your boundaries and stick to them. Know what your spirit and your mind and your body needs to function. If it's not at its best, to function well. And I was running on fumes for a long time. That's why my heart was like, okay, no, boo, you better sit down. So I don't want other people to have to get to the point where they're being forced to sit down and forced to rest. And I think us in the Black community, often that happens. And we don't know how to stop. We feel like we have to do twice as much to, prove to have the same access and same opportunities. So just know what you need, know what your body needs, and know when to rest, and being able to rest on what you have faith in. Where is your faith? What do you put your faith in? My faith, I've been working so hard on that in my relationship with God, and whatever your relationship is or whatever your situation is, just have that you can fall back on, that can give you the energy and the focus and the peace that you need to be able to, because this thing is hard. This thing called life, it has no chill, none whatsoever. And I'm just learning to figure it out. Don't take everything to heart. What and only focus on things that I can actually change. I was getting bent out of shape about. Thank you, Brittany. I was getting bent out of shape about all these things that I had no control over,
Hmm.
and it was killing me. It was killing me, literally. So, I had to do better, and I figured out therapy. I don't know if you I was skeptical at first, and I'm so thankful I was already in therapy before this pandemic hit. So I would definitely recommend counseling and having a support group, having a group of people that you can be open and honest with, you can vent to, you can work things out with,
And
work
I
through.
think that's important that we often focus in higher ed on the mental health of our students, but faculty, staff, administrators need to be focusing on their mental health as well. Especially with the extra stress we have of making things function, sometimes with budget cuts, with limited resources. I mean, you can't say we're not going to have a music program because we're in COVID. We just going to take time off until we back. So there are a lot of extra stressors, and I think sometimes we, as the people who are leading, it's
Mhm,
the same thing with people in ministry.
mhm,
We're having this influx of ministers committing suicide and things.
mhm,
Therapy is a good thing. I tell you
mhm.
all the time, it is okay to not be okay. Even therapists have therapists.
Yep.
And for those of you who might be Christian, the Lord gave us therapists as well.
And the kind of counseling we have to do with our students, the kind of situations that they're living in sometimes. And there have been sometimes some students that haven't had a home to go to,
Right.
and it pulls at you, and you don't know, at what point, am I a professor, and at what point do I need to do more? There's such a nurturing, there's so much more nurturing that happens at an HBCU.
There
uh,
are so many schools that allowed on-campus housing this semester. Even like Edward Waters College has an amazing way that you can still live on campus and be schooling virtually. They have many options for their students this year.
yeah.
But they realize, as many of us do, that we have students that don't have homes or that only get to eat regularly when they're at school. Uh,
Yes.
we have students who were in the foster care system before they came to us, and there is no family for them to go back to.
Or
And
their
so,
home or their community is a war zone.
right.
It's dangerous.
Or
We
their
have one
family,
mother telling
nuclear
us, like, I
family is
got to get my
unhealthy.
boys out of here, or they're not safe.
And
Yeah.
even sometimes they're in their home situations, there are things that are detrimental to their safety or security, and that they find comfort in being at school.
Yeah.
So I have great respect to the schools that are figuring out how to keep those services going,
Hmm.
even in COVID. The City College of Chicago, they have a food program for their students
Mm.
because, and a lot of our schools are in food deserts.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's great that, even in all of this, we're trying to figure out ways to make things work.
Yeah. Yep. And take care of yourself while you're doing it. Oh, thank you. Oh, he did. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, Dr. Smith. Ah, Lori. Yes, hi.
He was so funny.
Yeah, he's still kicking and screaming. I have his old position at the church. So
Right.
yeah, we talk often, and he is still around. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he retired what, like 4 times?
Yes, I think five. I think five. And it's still, we still called him back one time. Like, can you just come and do it for a few, just a little bit. But Doc, the wonderful information. And then I also have to shout out Dr. Roosevelt Shelton, who was the chair before me. The foundation he was able to lay, and the NASM self-study, and the things that I learned from him. I would not be able to continue in this job if he had not laid a wonderful foundation. So I got to send him a shout out as well as Barbara Buck. But I've been blessed to have administrators and people that have been schooling me that I can call. Dr. Marvin Curtis, that I can call for advice. And I tell you, Dr. Isaiah McGee, I've called him several times. I'm like, now I understand better some of the things that you had to, the decisions you had to make, and some of the things you had to do. I had no idea. And I was like, if I've caused you any kind of strife while I was, I apologize.
I mean, it's funny when you're on the other side of the table and you are having to make those decisions. And but Kentucky State's doing great things because we had Dr. Graham. He was one of our speakers, the chief of staff at Kentucky State, was one of our speakers for our HBCU conference last week. Amazing presentation for our students. So, I mean, Kentucky State is doing great things. It was originally where I was going to go, and then, I decided to go to Morehouse.
Yeah.
But, I had paid my non-refundable deposit to Kentucky State. My mother still asked me for that $300.
Like, Mama, have I not made you proud yet, Mama?
Right. 30 years later, we still ask for the $300.
And tell her I said hi, by the way, please.
I will. But, so it's great that, our schools are doing amazing things. And that's part of the reason that I do this program. Because we as a people and our schools are really impacting not just where we are, but society as a whole.
Yeah.
I've been so impressed with our student leaders on our campuses and how they're still galvanizing their peers when most of them are not even on their campuses.
Yeah.
And so their adaptability is a direct reflection of what they're learning at their institution. So we're doing great things.
Yeah.
So Dr. Hicks, it's been great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell the people your website once more and how they can reach you.
It's lchstudios.com. lchstudios.com. And you can find the boot camp under courses. I also almost forgot I have a free masterclass this coming Monday. So you can sign up for that under courses as well. Again, it's totally free. I've been working with singers of all styles, and it's really helped me to be more direct teaching online, and being able to give vocal tips and things like that. So if you're free Monday night at 7 Eastern Standard, whatever, just go ahead and sign up, or you can DM me if you can't find it on the website. Just send me a message saying you want the link to the masterclass. Instagram is at Dr. Hicks Music, and on Facebook, my personal page is Dr. Lori Hicks, and then my other page is Dr. Hicks Music.
Well, I'm so glad that we've had you on today, and I hope our students and visitors and viewers and everybody learned something from today's show. Make sure you reach out to Dr. Hicks. Look into her boot camp. Reach out to her, if you're in the area and looking for instruction. She does workshops across the country. You can hire her.
My best method. I started to wear this today.
You should have.
I should have. I was like, I got a rep KSU too.
But we appreciate having you on the show, and we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Y'all be blessed and stay safe.